Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. The final bills are currently being printed, and they will soon be sent up for votes. The respective leaders have been discussing the bills with their conferences, and we're going to wrap up the session. I am personally very happy and very proud of this legislative package. I think it's responsive to the problems that we're pressing the state right now. I think it actually is a very robust and extensive legislative package of reforms that goes a long way towards making the state a better state. We have a bill on sexual assault on campuses that is the smartest and toughest bill in the United States. I think it's going to set a new national model for other states to follow. We have the best extension of rent protections for the people in New York City that has ever been passed. The state was actually rolling back rent extensions for rent laws for many, many years. 2011, and this year we actually extended the protection for tenants, and this year's bill goes further than any bill in history. We have a $1.3 billion property tax reform that the Senate had advocated, which I think is exactly right. Property taxes are the albatross around the neck of this state when it comes to growth. The state has disproportionately high property taxes, and this $1.3 billion rebate program will actually go a long way towards giving New Yorkers real relief. We have an education reform package that extends parents' choice. It opens up what I call the black box of SED when it comes to testing and questions. And that goes a long way, $250 million in mandated services that will give much-needed support to the non-public schools. If our private schools and parochial schools continue to close, it would place a burden on the public system that we can't now handle. So making sure the public system is strong and the non-public system is strong is vital for both. And this bill does just that. It also extends parental choice with more charter school options, et cetera. We, by executive order, but with the assent of both houses, I will be appointing the Attorney General Special Prosecutor for situations dealing with a non-elected public official who, in the course of duty, kills someone who is unarmed. This, I think, will go a long way towards restoring trust in the criminal justice system. As everyone knows, there's been a plague across the country of incidents and situations that have shaken the trust in the criminal justice system. And this state will once again be the first state to respond with an institutional reform. We're going to revisit the issue next year, but this is a positive step forward that we're proud of. The so-called raise the age, we take the first step by having 16 and 17-year-olds removed from state prisons. And that is a very big deal, and it was a major imperative for this session. And we'll be creating facilities designed for those 16 and 17-year-olds that will be much more appropriate than a state prison. A situation developed with nail salons in New York City, and we passed a piece of legislation that is the first step towards addressing a much larger issue, which is the exploitation of undocumented workers in the state of New York. Again, it's a national problem, but it's a problem here in New York. The nail salon situation is just one manifestation of what is a much larger crisis. We have a wage board that we expect to come up with a aggressive resolution for minimum wage for fast food workers that we're excited about. The Yonkers school system was in peril and in crisis. They had a danger of asking 200 teachers to leave their positions because of a financial gap. And the state is going to step up to the plate with a financial package to address the Yonkers situation. We have Port Authority reforms that we've talked about for a long time, but Assemblyman Jim Brennan and Senator Andrew Lanza did a lot of good work with our neighbors across the river in New Jersey to come up with a Port Authority reform package, and I can go on and on. But it is a very extensive package that makes this state a better state. I also want to thank the leaders for the professionalism and orderly process that this session has been conducted. I want to thank the Senate for their extension of the rent laws over the past weekend, which gave the legislature time to go home and think about issues and then come back and have an expeditious resolution. I want to thank the teams that have done work on this project. This was a massive undertaking, and the Senate and the Assembly teams worked literally day and night to get this done. I don't know how, just from a stamina point of view, they do it. But Robert Mujica and Beth Garvey in the Senate really did extraordinary work. Jim Yates and Luann Saccone did extraordinary work. And personal indulgence, my team, which was Bill Mulrose, Secretary, Jim Malatras, Director of Operations, and Alfonso David, who did a phenomenal job as the counsel to see us through this process. Most of all, I want to thank my two colleagues, Speaker Carl Heastie and Senate Leader John Flanagan. As I said before, as I've said publicly and I've said privately, these gentlemen were in a very difficult situation. To step in as a new leader and to step in under the circumstances that they stepped in was extraordinarily difficult. And to step in at a point in the process where everything was already in motion. We had put a very aggressive agenda on the table in January when we did the State of the State. After we did the State of the State and set the agenda in January, we had all sorts of unexpected situations develop. And that these gentlemen could step in and step up in the midst of all of that and make the government work and make it work in an orderly way was extraordinary. And it wasn't easy. I can tell you that. These issues are controversial. They're difficult. We like to advocate in the ideal, but then we live in the real. And they had to fight for their conference, fight for their perspectives, which on many occasions are different. That's what democracy is all about. But you also have to have the intelligence to realize that at the end of the day, progress is better than stalemate. And that's exactly what you see today. So on a personal and professional level, I want to thank them for not only waging a very strong and ferocious battle, but reaching a reasonable and intelligent compromise that, frankly, no one is exactly happy with everything. And if the Assembly had their way, you'd have a different set of legislative proposals. If the Senate had all their way, there'd be a different set of legislative proposals. But this is a package that works for the state, and that's what's most important. With that, let me turn it over to Senate Leader John Flanagan.
Thank you, Governor, and thank you to Speaker Heastie. I want to touch on one thing that the Governor said a couple of moments ago. The people who are sitting up here, obviously we are elected officials, but are flanked by some extraordinarily competent people, and just use the opportunity to laud how many thousands of good people actually work in government. I think that gets lost in the mix a lot of times. We could not accomplish the things that we do on behalf of the people that we represent if we didn't have extraordinarily dedicated, passionate, competent people working with us and working for us. So this is absolutely a team effort. I certainly, again, want to thank my colleague and friend, Carl Heastie, and I also want to thank the members of our conference. Sometimes people look at the Senate as being one-dimensional, and I think that we are anything but. We have a lot of demographic, geographic differences, and we ultimately know that we can work together and we have to work together. And as the Governor said, at some point we do have to be about compromise, and what the public really wants to know is what are we doing to make their lives better? The Governor spoke to the session from its onset, and sometimes at the end of a given session, particularly in a year like this with a lot of things expiring, you overlook many of the good things that happened earlier on. I'm just going to focus on two things which are really together, and that is the record increase in aid to education, the commitment that we've all made There was over a 6% increase in education aid this year, which is basically triple more than any other area of the budget. And in order to stay within essentially a self-imposed state spending cap, the governor put out a proposal that we ultimately embraced that kept a lot of other spending at a very low level or flat so we could meet our commitment to public education. We also did, I think, a terrific job in virtually coming close to eliminating the gap elimination adjustment. And by next year, that hopefully will be in the history books as going by the boards. And in terms of what the governor was speaking to, there are a lot of good things in here. The property tax cap extension, the property tax cap, the tax rebates. And again, we had an opportunity to speak about this, but affordable housing, all these things ultimately go together. And I know that, representing the interests of the members of our conference, that we have a lot of differences, but we have a lot of similarities. And, we want people, as I said a couple of days ago, to be able to afford to live in the communities they want to have an excellent educational opportunity for their children, and to have an opportunity for a great job. All those things are so incredibly important. And, the governor, I think, I'm just going to use the phrase real results for real people. And what we're doing now has been characterized, as the big whatever it may be. I really do look at this. There are strong components for affordable housing. There's property tax relief. There's an extension of the property tax cap. So those are all very positive things. There's a lot of things that we can take away from here and go back, I think, with some pride to the people we represent collectively and individually and say, here's what we did. And I also think this is a very good blueprint for how we go forward. I'm sure the governor will have a very ambitious agenda in next year's budget again. Well, we got so much done now, hopefully it'll be a little smaller. But anyway, we will have plenty to continue to work on. And again, my congratulations to the governor and to the speaker, and I want to thank them as well for just being good people to work with.
Thank you. Thank you. Nicely said. And now we'll turn it over to Speaker Carl Heastie. I've known the speaker for many, many years, before he was the speaker, when he was a mere mortal assemblyman. And this, as I said, was a really, really challenging period. Both leaders represent a conference. I have a conference that's also difficult to deal with, but it's a conference of one, you see. So I take my hat off to both of them, but Speaker Carl Heastie really did an extraordinary job, and I turn it over to him now.
Thank you, Governor. First, let me thank Senator Flanagan for his cooperation and working to get to a place where we could all be comfortable. But before I get to the things we covered, and I guess we said the big whatever, I do want to acknowledge two very important people to me who helped navigate us through this. One is Jim Yates, and two is Luann Saccone. But I do want to give a special mention to Jim, because this will be Jim's last session as he wants to retire. So I just wanted to publicly thank him for everything he did for the New York State Assembly. In regards to what we put together, as the governor said, the Assembly has a vision. The Senate has a vision of what they'd like to see, and as we've always said in Albany, it's the art of the compromise, and that's where we came to. We got to a compromise where I'm sure Senator Flanagan and his members can feel like they covered their bases, and I feel the same way that for us in the Assembly, that we covered our bases to make sure that all of our constituents, and for us, with 104 members, all across the state, it was always important for me to make sure that every part of the state felt represented and always had a seat at the table. And I'm sure we're going to have a lot more work to do in the next session, and even to all the members of the press. I guess I can say I'll miss you, maybe. But it was really good working together with the two gentlemen to my left.
Thank you very much. Also, let me just add an exclamation point on the speaker's point about Jim Yates. I've worked with Jim for the past 5 years. Mr. Yates has had an extraordinary career in public service. He was an extraordinary member of the judiciary. He was a judge where we dealt, when I was the Attorney General, he was a judge on many of our important cases. I can tell you he was a very tough judge. I'll leave it at that. But a great public servant, and with this last session, which was extraordinarily challenging, it wouldn't have been possible without the leadership of Jim Yates and his team, so I want to thank them very much. With that, questions, comments?
Whose wedding are you planning on officiating at?
Yours, actually. No, Erica goes first. Erica orders first. After we passed the marriage equality law, which we're all very proud of in this state, I've had a number of requests to conduct marriages. Many people are authorized under the law. The governor wasn't one of them. County executives are, judges are, mayors are, and I've had a number of requests. I didn't have the legal authority. I can do ceremonial. So some of these marriages are very meaningful to me personally, and I'd like the opportunity to officiate. I don't have any particular marriages in mind. Anyone who's interested, let me know.
Governor, in recent days, there have been some administrative officials who've been quoted saying some things about the mayor of New York City. I think one administrative official told the Wall Street Journal that he was bumbling and incompetent. Does that reflect your thinking of Mr. de Blasio? And if not, is there going to be any consequence for this official, whoever it might be?
The mayor is a personal friend of mine for many, many years. And he has a very difficult job. There are a number of proposals that the city put forth, and the mayor advocated tenaciously for his proposals, as is his job. We've had a disagreement on a number of policy matters. He did his job, I did my job. I think the city of New York does very, very well in this package. I think, is it perfect from the city's point of view? No. Is it ever going to be perfect? No. But you look at what the city asked for, that's what the city received. The mayor of the city of New York controls the education system and will continue to control the education system. The rent reform package is the best rent reform package in history. Well, some people say it's still not enough. It's the best in history. And for some people, it'll never be enough, frankly. The mayor wanted the affordable housing program renewed, the 421A program renewed. It's not only renewed, I believe it's improved. One of the issues that came from the city's proposal was that organized labor felt that they were left out. This approach continues the program, but also calls upon the parties to resolve their differences if they want the program to continue, which is in both of their interests. So I think at the end of the day, it's a great package for New York City. I think it basically satisfies the needs that the mayor articulated on behalf of New York City. Everything he wanted just the way he wanted it? No. But this package is not everything Senator Flanagan wanted. It's not everything Speaker Heastie wanted. It's not everything that I wanted. But it addresses the needs fundamentally.
But you just described him again as your friend. I know you've talked a lot about how you guys are friends. You go way back. You work together at HUD. But an official in your administration is quoted in a pretty major newspaper. Does that concern you? Is there something that you think you're going to do in response to this? Or
no, Jimmy, things are said, and feelings run high. And as I said, the mayor and his team are tenacious advocates. I am a tenacious advocate, and members of my team are a tenacious advocate.
Governor?
And I wouldn't expect otherwise. Sir?
Governor, if I can ask you a question about the Anamora breakout.
Yes,
sir. You said that you would have been shocked to find out that the guard was involved, and you see a guard's been arrested. My question is, are you shocked, and what are you going to do about this situation?
We have not established that the guard was involved in directly aiding the breakout, right? The allegation is that the guard acted improperly. And the state's position is they have significant evidence that the guard acted improperly. That is different than saying the guard directly aided in the escape. But the point is the same. We will have zero tolerance for improper activity on behalf of a correction officer, and that's what our swift action shows here. Also, you brought up the Dannemora. There is some of the newspapers have suggested that we know as a fact that the escapees are armed. We do not know that for a fact. They may be armed because there are reports that the cabin that we believe they were in may be missing a long gun, but we don't have that confirmed. Prudence would suggest treat them as if they are armed, but we don't have that definitive.
Governor, on rent, the advocates have said that they think this law, while a small step forward in their words, would wind up costing tens of thousands of rent-regulated apartments over the 4 years of the law. That you're going to lose tens of thousands, maybe as much as 90,000, 95,000. Well, what's your response to that?
Yeah, as I said, Ken, look, first of all, it's the best law in the history of the state of New York, right? There are more protections in this law than ever in history. Well, it's still not enough, say the advocates. Yes, we advocate for the ideal. We live in the real. It would be better if we lost no units. Of course. Of course. It would be better if no one got sick. It would be better if no one had to pay taxes. A lot of things would be better. But this is the best in history. It reduces greatly the number of units that come out of the system. But this is not going to address the affordable housing crisis alone. You have to reduce the number you lose, and you have to build more. 421A is a step in that direction. So will the advocates advocate? Yes. I was at one time a homeless advocate, and my job was to advocate for more. And that is the business. If you had a homeless advocate, whoever said, we don't need any more affordable housing, that would be a homeless advocate who just put themselves out of business, right?
The advocates and even some of your fellow Democrats, particularly in the Assembly, but also the Senate, have questioned. They said you have said one thing publicly, rhetorically, that you want to go for the strongest rent protections, and then they say privately you've been siding with the Senate Republicans.
Siding. I work to get a resolution, and I work to get compromise. I am the result. This rent law is not what I proposed, as you know. I proposed a more aggressive law, and I supported a more aggressive law. So did the Assembly. That's when the Speaker talks about the art of compromise. This was the law that we could get passed by both houses. Is it a perfect law? No. But again, Ken, when you're talking about a law that is the best that has ever been passed before, right, you have to put it in a relative context. There has to be a certain reality to a criticism, right?
How is it the best ever?
It is the strongest ever, period. You had rent laws expire over the past 20 years, and what happened over the past 20 years is when the rent law expired, it was reduced in terms of protection. 1993, it was reduced in terms of protection. The only laws that actually extended the protections were 2011 and this law, both of which I did. Well, it's not perfect. Yeah, it's not perfect. Is that right on the facts, Jim? Okay.
Governor, in your daily news op-ed on rent regulations, you said specifically that you either want to see vacancy decontrol ended or the cap significantly increased, or you call a special session. Specifically related to that, has it gone up high enough then?
I would have liked to see it go up higher.
So what are you calling a special session?
No, I believed I would call a special session if the laws were not extended, not if they weren't extended exactly the way I believe they should be extended. Is that right, Melissa? Do you remember?
Governor, can you tell me what is in this agreement for the Yonkers school system?
In this agreement, the Yonkers school system will receive, I believe, $25 million to resolve this year's financial gap. The city will then need to restructure because this is not on a recurring basis. We understood the financial crisis this year and last year, and the state was asked to step up and help this year, and we will. $25 million.
When you announced that the proposed sum for Yonkers, you also put on the table the idea of, I believe it was $100 million to assist struggling upstate schools.
Yes.
Is that included at all in this?
No, just an aid package for Yonkers.
Governor, are you the top administration official who yesterday questioned the mayor's Albany strategy?
I said a lot of things yesterday. I don't know exactly what, which one you're referring to, but there's no doubt that we had a difference of opinion on this package of bills and how it was handled, and the proposal for 421A's renewal. I did not support the mayor's 421A renewal. I don't believe it could have passed. I don't believe it could have passed either house as drafted. I don't believe you can have a package that says organized labor has no role whatsoever. I said that at the time. I repeated it yesterday. I've repeated it every time I was asked. I think this is a much better proposal, and it's realistic.
Why do you anonymously criticize him? How does that help?
If I don't believe a proposal makes sense, I say that it doesn't make sense. I think it's better to be clear up front about a situation rather than let it develop, and then you say down the road, well, how did this happen? 421A was not going to happen.
Well, why do so anonymously as opposed to on the record?
Well, sometimes we talk on the record, sometimes we talk on background. You know, there's just a variety, depends on the context. Sometimes it's a little faster to talk off the record, as you know.
Speaker Heastie, I was wondering if you could talk about the minimum wage proposal that was on the table and why you think it wasn't going to work in these negotiations.
As I've always said, it's a conference of 104 members, not just New York City, and we want to make decisions collectively. We don't want to make it seem like one part of the state is more important than any other, and it's always a collective decision.
Senator, can you explain the Senate majority's position on extending mayoral control for a year, and just what you think you might be able to learn in a year's time that might convince the conference to extend it for a longer period of time, as with like the previous Senate renewal?
Well, first of all, I would say a couple of different things. We are guided in large part by my colleagues, Senators Lanza, Golden, and Felder. And you know, Senator Felder caucuses with us, and he's been a very valuable colleague on a variety of issues, including education and the issue of mayoral control. Our conference did not feel a level of comfort. And you know, I sat as the chair of the Education Committee, and I want to be very fair. I want the mayor to do well. I want the city of New York to do well, but I also think it's realistic to inquire and ask some hard questions. And I've heard the governor say this, and I concur. You know, the city of New York needs significant amount of school aid, which they get. And if it's a $9 billion check, I think it's within our purview and our responsibility to ask appropriate questions. Where's the money going? If you're dealing with struggling schools and you're coming up with money, $150 million to run a program, where is that money coming from? What schools is it going to? Does that mean that money is being wisely spent or potentially money being taken away from other areas of the city? And I've had people say, you know, this should be no interest, you don't represent the city. I certainly do. I certainly represent my conference and our conference. And earlier in the year, we had endeavored to set up some hearings, and we didn't really have any cooperation. So I think a year's time will allow everyone to have more in-depth discussions. And I believe in mayoral control. Let me be clear about that. But I also know I've heard assembly members on both sides of the aisle and senators on both sides of the aisle who question mayoral control. It's not just the Senate Republicans. I've heard members say that they think mayoral control should expire. I think doing it for a year is a good thing to do, and I expect that we will have very intense discussions, and I expect that the mayor and his staff will continually reach out to our city colleagues, because that's a threshold for me and the people that I work with in our conference. If our colleagues feel they're in a good spot, that's a great sign of where we'll end up being as a conference.
Just the three of you
Excuse me
about...
1 second. Also on mayoral control. Mayoral control, if you think it's a good idea, which I think my colleagues and I would agree with, then the state has to look at mayoral control in other areas of the state also, right? If it works in New York City, well, maybe it will work in other cities across the state. So next year, I think we're going to have the opportunity to visit it in a broader context. You have other cities that are now talking about it and thinking about it, upstate cities, and I think that's a good conversation.
Governor, it's actually to the three men. I think we're going to adjourn without taking any action on East Ramapo. Can you talk about why that's happening and what message you have to the people there who are probably going to have to go through another school year with the same dynamic? Governor, do you want to go first?
I don't believe there's going to be a bill passed on East Ramapo. If there is a bill that is passed by the Senate and the Assembly, we'll take it up at that time. We have taken an action. I had appointed basically a monitor to the situation, but I don't believe there was an agreed-to bill going forward this year.
And for the students there, another school year,
Well,
I know you've talked about the problem there.
Yeah, it is a very difficult problem. It's a complex problem. There's not a piece of legislation to deal with it this year, and we'll continue to work on it, and I'm sure we'll revisit it next session.
Senator, same question.
Yeah, I've attended a ton of meetings on this subject, met with all kinds of people from the local communities, have been in contact with Senator Carlucci, Assemblywoman Jaffe. I spoke to Senator Carlucci this morning. There are some sort of basic issues that some people are dismissive of, but we actually think are very important. The concept of local control, in essence home rule, you're essentially usurping or stripping the powers of a duly elected school board, and that's something that I think we all need to look at, not just in an isolated way for one school district, but rather how does that affect public policy and educational policy across the state of New York. And I have colleagues, and I agree with this to some extent, there are certain things that SED can do, there are certain things that the Comptroller's Office can do, and we think before you take statutory action, taking away some of that local control, what are they doing? Are they acting aggressively enough in their capacity as fiduciaries, not only the Comptroller's Office, but SED? And we're going to continue to have those discussions. That is a very unique school district, but I also know when the state has intervened in the past, our record has not been very stellar. So these are serious issues. We will continue to have discussions. I expect when I get back upstairs that I will have more people talking to me on this very subject.
The last question, Governor.
Can you explain how the education piece
Wait,
will affect? I'm sorry.
I do want to respond to the East Ramapo. Well, for us in the Assembly, we did pass a bill acknowledging that there are some deep issues in East Ramapo. And I do think that's what government is here for. When you have a situation where there's a school district where there aren't even enough teachers for students, where students have to have 4 study halls in a day because there aren't enough teachers, there aren't enough subjects being taught to the students, I think it is time for us to take a look and intervene. So I just want to make sure that you guys have on record, the Assembly did pass a bill on this.
Governor, last question on the prison break.
Let's just do Michael and then Erica.
Can you just explain how the education piece will affect homes and schools? Just briefly, what's in this bill in the education piece?
Which part of it, Michael? The tax cut?
No, I'm sorry. The actual instruction. The region's looking at Common Core, the testing.
Oh, the SED parental disclosure piece? Do you want to do that, Jim?
It discloses test questions so families can see what those test questions and answers were. It creates a committee to review curriculum so various stakeholders can see what learning standards are actually being developed and taught in the state. And it looks at certain things like what the student growth measures and other things go into education policy so people have transparency and families know exactly what's going on in their classrooms and what curricula is being taught.
Yeah, I think, Mike, part of the question about the tests, the standardized tests, and the anxiety about the tests are people don't know. They just have questions and they can't get answers. What are the questions? What do the tests look like? So this is a measure that will provide more transparency, more disclosure, more information. As I said when we talked about the framework of it, the black box of SED, the government agency that seems secretive, this will provide more information.
Governor,
I'm sorry, Erica?
why wasn't the Clinton County DA aware that the guard was being arrested in the prison break?
I have no idea.
Is there a lack of communication or?
No, the communication, I believe, has been very good. I've spoken to a number of the local law enforcement officials myself. They convene daily briefings where they're all coordinated. I don't know specifically whether or not the DA was talked to about this. I don't know.
What the IG is finding?
Well, one of the things that we want to find out is what happened here. I mean, there are a lot of questions. What happened here? How did these people get the tools to conduct this really massive engineering task of this breakout? What period of time was it? How could it have gone undetected? And are there lessons for us to learn, right? Are there, we want to make sure this doesn't happen again. So how did this happen? Was there a breakdown in the system? If there wasn't a breakdown in the system, should we change the system? Should we change the rules to make sure that this doesn't happen again?
Have they found anything yet that you can share?
No. This is their mandate is broad, and I don't expect any short answer here. I don't think you can do it. You can't do a thorough job quickly. This is we want an in-depth look at how it happened. Again, were there a breakdown in any of the procedures that we have in place, or do we need new procedures? Now, part of it, I think, is going to be unique to Dannemora. This is approximately a 100-year-old facility, and it is a labyrinth of catwalks, tunnels, utility corridors. Maybe there's something about the design of this prison, the construction of the cell. So those are the questions that we would ask.
You put pension forfeiture on your list of required ethics fixes for the budget. It looks like the session's going to expire, and there has been, I think the Assembly still needs to take action on what was apparently the agreement on bill. Where is that going? What went wrong? Does the ultimatum essentially push forward to the next budget season?
Yes, and yes. You know, we didn't reach resolution on the issue. It will be pushed forward until the next session. And yes, we have a difference of opinion.
Flanagan, the Assembly passed what we've been calling Laverne's Law to change the statute of limitations on medical malpractice cases. The governor said he would sign it if it passed the legislature. It doesn't appear it's going to pass the Senate before the end of session. How come?
Ken, this is part of an overall set of issues, and in the entire time I've served in the legislature, it's very rare when they have been looked at in isolation. I take these issues very seriously, as do I know all of my colleagues in both houses, and certainly the governor has made his public comments known. I have spoken to a variety of people who are involved in this on both sides of the issue, and immediately following session, we will be putting together a series of roundtables to go through these issues in more depth. And I believe that we will effectuate some plan and or compromise that will get the issue that you're talking about done sooner rather than later.
Governor, we heard about some attempts to change at the last minute the 421A program. Can you confirm that, and did it end up more or less what you guys outlined here on Tuesday?
It ended up more or less what we outlined on Tuesday. There are efforts to change every law until the printer prints, or I guess nowadays until it goes up on the screen, because they don't even have printers that print. But so that is the nature of the beast, Zach, especially when you have something like 421A that has as many varied interests as 421A does. But that's the nature of the beast, and it is basically what we discussed in the framework. It is a better bill than the proposal we received. And the proposal we received, I don't think, was viable from a legislative point of view. Yes, you need a good idea that can also be accepted as a good idea. And one of the main problems with 421A proposal, in my opinion, was the total exclusion of organized labor, which, by the way, was accepted, was a problem not just for me, but for the Assembly and for the Senate. Organized labor came together and unified and actually mounted a national campaign where we had the national head of the AFL-CIO complaining about the exclusion of labor. We have included it, I think, in a very artful way, where we have not intervened to negotiate between organized labor and the real estate interests. we left it to them and said, you figure it out and come together. And if you don't figure it out and come together, then the program expires and everybody loses. And national head of the AFL-CIO, Richard Trumka, today basically said thank you and endorsed the approach. The state president of the AFL-CIO endorsed the approach, but it is the same program essentially as announced. I'm sure there are going to be some minor changes because there are always minor changes until it's completed.
Can the state be taking any additional steps to get people who own assault rifles to register them in the state? It seems like most people that own them have ignored the SAFE Act.
I don't know what the actual numbers are. People use numbers. Well, I have an estimate there are 1 million, there are 2 million, there are 3 million. I don't know that anyone actually knows. So I don't know that anyone knows what the actual level of compliance is.
So no further steps at this point?
No.
Can somebody tell us logistically how this will go? Is this all going to be put into one bill? Are the votes coming tonight?
Yes, we have one bill. It's named the Big Lovely, is what we call it.
And the vote is coming tonight?
The vote, well, that's up to these gentlemen. I know my part is done. But yes, the vote, as I understand it, is planned for this evening.
So then, assuming that you are going to issue a message of necessity, can you speak to why you feel it is necessary, given that it's about 5 p.m. we still haven't seen bill language in it?
We have first, there is nothing in this bill that we haven't talked to ad nauseum at this point. As bills go, it's an omnibus bill. It's not compared to a budget bill or something like that. It's not the largest bill, and it's fairly straightforward. And we have a very practical problem, which is the rent laws have expired, and we are now dealing in a critical situation, in my opinion. We have said to the real estate industry in the city of New York that we don't want to see any landlord take precipitous action. But as we sit here and chat, you could have a landlord moving right now on the fact that there are no laws in place. And that could be a tragedy for thousands of New York City people. So getting these laws in place is critical.
You gentlemen talk about, are there any other issues that you would have liked to see taken up this session?
Yes, I wish they could have cured cancer, Jimmy. I wish the East Ramapo, Burns Law, and curing cancer. You tend to focus on what wasn't done. I think what's important to remember here is this is an extraordinarily broad package, from tax relief to education reform to affordable housing, some of the most controversial situations in New York City, to addressing probably the most pressing problem in the suburbs in upstate New York, which is property taxes. I am amazed that it is as comprehensive and robust as it is. Does it fix every problem in the state of New York? No. Will we ever fix every problem in the state of New York? Probably not. All right, we thank you all very much for taking the time.